Welcome. We thank you for being here with us. In efforts to transform schooling and education in our region and to recruit and support and sustain critically conscious, strong Black educators and co-conspirators, we at the University of Pittsburgh are engaging in a four-year initiative called Practices of Freedom, a model for transformative teaching and teacher education. I am grateful to have several members of the inaugural cohort of this program to join you and me in what I know will be rich dialogue, centered around educational futures in which we are free, and Black legacies of resistance and revolutionary education that direct our paths onward. So we'll start by introducing ourselves. We're going to introduce ourselves to you through our freedom dreams, through our visions for liberatory futures of education, and sharing the quotes that guide our lives, our studies, and our pedagogies. And we have a Jamboard, so we hope that you'll share your freedom dreams with us too. If you're able to turn on your camera, we would love to see you if you feel comfortable and safe to do so as well. So here's our grounding question for orienting us into the space and with one another. We chose 7 generations to structure our freedom dreams based on a principle practiced by the Haudenosaunee people, or Iroquois indigenous people. The 7th generation value requires us to think of those who are not born yet, but one day will inherit the world that we leave them within all of our decision making. So I'll start by sharing the Jamboard link for you all to access. And we're going to play a short video about abolitionist teaching, where some of us heard of this concept for the first time. The teacher speaking, her name is Marilyn Zuniga. She is a teacher from Chicago in this panel broadcast by the Education for Liberation Network. Let me know if you have audio. Give me a thumbs up if you have audio, or make a face.
When I think of abolitionist teaching, I think of Black freedom fighters in this country. I think of Assata Shakur. I think of Abu Jamal. I think of folks who have been put away simply for fighting for their freedom. And so when I think about those folks and I think about the work that they must have done, not just with the systems that we need to abolish, but the systems and structures in their lives, the systems and structures within themselves that still live, right? And so for me, when I think about abolitionist teaching, I think about looking within yourself, looking around you, and also looking beyond you, and making a lifetime commitment to working to abolish all the areas and systems in your life that are colonized and oppressive practices, right? And so when I think about that, I think about your relationships. How are you decolonizing your relationships? How are you abolishing oppressive practices in your relationships? How are you doing that work within your workplace, right? Are you in your workplace disrupting those systems? Or are you in your workplace staying silent? Are you in your workplace in a place of comfort? Are you in your workplace not speaking up or not protecting or not supporting the voices of Black, Indigenous, Brown, people of color, critical educators that are speaking up in your workplace? I think about you doing the work in your homes. I think about the work that I've done in my home. And when I say home, I mean my home as in my home, my physical home, and me and my partner who live here. I think about my home back home in New Jersey, where I'm from, my family. I think about the home that I build and co-create with my students, right? How are we dismantling all of these systems within all of these contexts, within your own ideology? How are you decolonizing time within your life, right? And so for me, that's what that means. And it has been a lifelong commitment and a process of really understanding and honoring 7 generations that have come before me, the 7 generations that will come after me, and honoring that process of what that looks like, to know who you are, to know where you come from, so that you can know where you're going, so that you can be present, and so that your spirit is not murdered by these institutions. I love how Dr. Bettina Love talks about spirit murdering in schools, because they are spirit murdering institutions. And so how are you feeding your spirit, right? And how are you feeding your spirit so that you can show up to feed the spirit of your students and your children that are—
Sorry for that break, but she said the children who are looking up at you. I am going to put the link to the Jamboard in again. Thank you for your patience as I am have multiple screens open and trying to navigate everything. So let's get that in track.
When I think of
Here we go. So I'm going to introduce myself first, then we're going to move through each of the panelists, and then we'll go to the Jamboard, which I just put in the chat. I see folks are still coming in. We're introducing ourselves through our freedom dreams, through our visions for liberatory education 7 generations from now, and also sharing quotes from bell hooks. This year, our central text was Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks, and we're elevating different quotes from her that guide our lives, our studies, our pedagogies as educators. So, like I said, I'm going to go first. To educate as the practice of freedom comes easiest to those of us who teach, who also believe that there's an aspect of our vocation that is sacred, who believe that our work is to share in the intellectual and spiritual growth of our students. To teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students is essential. My name is Rachel Hopkins. I have the pleasure of being the program director for Practices of Freedom and bringing these wonderful people together in study and community. In 7 generations, I hope that education is a site of healing and authentic community and coalition building and activism, that students and educators understand their shared fate and collaborate in pursuing freedom. We'll hear from Philicity next.
My name is Felicity Walker, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a rising senior at Woodland Hills High School, and I'm also one of the high schoolers in Practices of Freedom. And for my quote, I picked, as a classroom community, our capacity to generate excitement is deeply affected by our interest in one another, and hearing one another's voices and recognizing one another's presence. And this goes back into how I hope education will look 7 generations from now, because truthfully, I just want a comfortable environment for all students, all BIPOC, minorities, equal opportunities, and freedom of expression. And that starts with hearing each other and understanding one another. And that's for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felicity. And then Nekiya.
Hi, my name is Nekiya Washington-Butler. I am an upcoming senior in the CASE program, and to give you a little synopsis of what the CASE program is, it's a 5-year accelerated program to where I will end up getting my master's in early ed and special ed and my bachelor's in developmental psychology. So for my quote, I did something a little bit different. I didn't choose a bell hook. I chose something that, came straight from me. It starts off with saying, culturally responsive social education supports not only diverse teaching, but also diverse thinking. And I came up with this quote because I feel as though the pipeline, the teacher pipeline within education is, number one, not diverse, which we all know. But in Pennsylvania, the number is less than 10% of teachers who are people of color inside the classroom. But people of color represent about almost half in Pennsylvania. So you kind of can see where that falls in line. However, I think when I thought about this quote, I thought about this idea of quota and how a lot of institutions want to meet this quota, but they don't think about the substance that they're bringing in inside the classroom. So yes, we can have people of color inside the classroom, but what is the substance that they're actually bringing? And I think that's a huge marker for me with trying to bring in diversity, but not thinking about who we are trying to meet and the diverse people that we're actually bringing in, which I think ties into what I expect school to be 7 generations from now, or not even school, but the education system as a whole. Number one, I want it to be diverse. And like I just stated, I want it to be diverse to where we have diversity and substance, not just we're trying to meet this quota. Also, I feel as though because I want to be a teacher, I want education to be very much student-led and just being able to allow the students to kind of choose what they want to learn. Because, it shows and it states that, when we bring in what students are interested in, it helps them understand what subject matter that you're trying to teach. So I think those would be my 2 things, is seeing more brown and Black people of substance inside the classroom who aren't just sub teachers, but actually the lead teacher on top of, just seeing classroom being student led. And I think my last thing would definitely be, we talk about equality and diversity, but actually, and teachers going to these different workshops that are, they're not forced, but they are told to go to look good for the school, but actually seeing what they're learning in these workshops and bringing them inside the classroom, and actually seeing diversity and equality and a lot of other things that fall in that category. Thank you.
Thank you, Nekiya. Amarachi.
Hello, my name is Amarachi Iheme. I'm a rising junior at Pitt, and my major is communication sciences and disorders, and I completed a minor in linguistics. I know you're probably wondering how my major is relevant to education, but I plan to be a speech therapist in an elementary school. And I recently just got hired to be an associate teacher for 1 to 2-year-olds at Wonders for UPMC, the UPMC. So I'm really excited to bring the framework that I've learned from Practices of Freedom to shape young minds, that shape young minds I'll be working with. I'm really excited. So yeah. The quote I have is from Teaching to Transgress. It's by Bell Hooks. She kind of inspired my, I don't know what adjective to use, but she kind of inspired my passion for teaching. And actually, when I was at the center that I'll be working at, I was sharing with the cohort that there are keywords like service or care or community that maybe written into mission statements that kind of signal to me whether or not the center may be truly committed or not to the children that they're essentially serving. So with that, I'll read the quote. It says, "Teaching was about service, giving back to one's community. For Black folks, teaching, educating was fundamentally political because it was rooted in anti-racist struggle." And that quote resonated with me because, like I said before, service, and then on top of that, it just kind of made me think about how it's okay, we'll be comfortable with the idea that it's okay to have radical, what some people may label as a radical thinking. For example, I know that not a lot of funding goes to kind of making higher education more inclusive. So, and then it can be anywhere from that all the way to me thinking about the Black Panther Party and everything that went on during the Civil Rights era. So yes, and my pronouns are she, her, but I also go by she, they, because I refer to myself sometimes as we. So FYI. Thank you.
Thank you. Haley?
Hi, my name is Haley Sill. I'm a rising senior at the University of Pittsburgh in the CASE program as well. I also chose a similar quote. Teaching was about service, giving back to one's community. I feel like that's my driving force always in everything that I do, whether it's teaching or just being involved throughout campus or in the community setting. And I just hope education in the next few years just looks a little something without limits. I always dream of a fearless classroom where students have no fear of who they are, no fear of who the person next to them is, no fear of chasing their dreams, no fear of going beyond. Basically, fearless classrooms is what I hope for everyone in the future and what I'll continue to fight for. So thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Sister IAsia.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Sister IAsia, or Sister I. I use she, her, or cis pronouns. I'm a community educator representing Children's Windows to Africa today. I am a doctoral candidate at the through the Center for Urban Education at the University of Pittsburgh's School of Education. And I'm lifting up Dr. Bettina Love today, who said, and then you get to this moment where you're an abolitionist, which means that you are willing to dismantle oppressive systems and create alternative spaces, because what we know is that social contract, this social experiment called democracy, has failed Black people. And this quote is important to me because of the work that I do in the Pittsburgh public schools, and the major creative alternative space that I create is by working with continental African students across Pittsburgh public schools to let them know and let others know and see the beauty and the power of solidarity among African descended people that represent a pretty big population in the Pittsburgh public schools currently, and to allow that to be a source of unity and uplift for the students, because 7 generations from now, for me, all the if-then statements in education begin to apply. No matter what they are, no matter who's articulating them, they begin to become real. 7 generations from now, the evolution of the public educational urban state is evident, meaning that we're winning because we believe that we can win. We believe that we can change. And I want to recognize Mother Sister Tamanika Howes, one of the original advocates for African American students that's on this call with us, and all of the people that she moved with decades ago to bring equity to the Pittsburgh public schools. And equity in the Pittsburgh public schools was birthed through a matrilineal line. It's important to acknowledge that it was the sister women scholars that brought that forward. And 7 generations from now, are the expansion and the improvement of equity is accessible to anybody who needs it, particularly Black and Brown students. The equity state is illuminated, and justice meets its duality, which is the idea of healing and uplift. We can have some fire, but we have to have a little bit of water sometimes too, because that's what children, in those settings, children are able to thrive. And lastly, similar to what another sister said, that the improved or perfected state of equity yields humbly to the other pillars that make it what it is, whether it's diversity, accessibility, or belonging, or inclusion even. So that's how I dream education 7 generations from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister I. Tricia.
Sorry, I was looking for my tabs, as you said. Hi, my name is Tricia Barbas, and I teach high school English at Pittsburgh SciTech. It's a PPS magnet school that's in Oakland. And I chose a quote. It's actually the last line in Teaching to Transgress. And Bell Hooks said that the classroom, with all its limitations, remains a location of possibility. In that field of possibility, we have the opportunity to labor for freedom, to demand of ourselves and our comrades, an openness of mind and heart that allows us to face reality, even as we collectively imagine ways to move beyond boundaries to transgress. And the main thing that when I thought of this quote is something that I find myself having to think about and remind myself with Bell Hooks' words there, that word possibility and opportunity to labor for freedom is, I think about those words possibility and opportunity every day when I am at work. And that definitely, I think it goes into the question about the 7 generations. When I first heard this question, I first actually thought about reading. As an English teacher, I thought about reading. And I've been teaching for 16 or 17 years now. And the number of young people who love and enjoy reading books is quite small. So I think about reading, and one of the things that reminds me of what this quote is, like the speaker in our first video said, but looking back, I think about chapter 7 in the narrative of Frederick Douglass, where he first comes to his own cognition about what reading can do and how he forces himself to find ways to learn to read. I know the whole CUESEF session is also asking us about memory. And when I think about this question about 7 generations prior, it reminded me of a CUE session a few years ago, where Dr. Jarvis Gibbons and Dr. Heather Andrea Williams spoke about fugitive pedagogy. They talked about their work with understanding and researching self-taught enslaved African Americans during the time of slavery and freedom. And I think about all those lessons about how reading was emancipatory, and reading was for not just the liberation of your own self and your own mind, but it was absolutely done in collective community. For, as Sister I said, as for healing, as for joy, and ultimately for their own self-liberation. So I think about what reading was, and then I see what reading, instruction, education has become. Mostly, we'll point to capitalism and imperialism of curriculum and instruction and school spaces. So when I think 7 generations from now, I could really hope for reading to be joyful and liberatory for every single young person, for every person's collective well-being and healing and their own minds. So all goes together there. Thanks.
Thank you. And lastly, but not least, Jason.
Peace. Thank everybody for joining us. My name is Jason Orr. I am an educator. I've been at it for about going on, I would say about 15 years. I work for Propel schools, but I like to believe that I am more accountable to my community, the children, the families of my community than I am my school district. So, who I work for doesn't limit me. I have the privilege and honor of teaching social studies history to 7th and 8th grade students. And the quote that I chose was from Bell Hooks. It was really a blessing tapping into Bell Hooks. I had always heard about her impact and her writings on education, but really delving into her was really an eye-opening experience. The quote that I chose: almost all teachers at Booker T. Washington were Black women. They were committed to nurturing intellect so that we could become scholars, thinkers, and cultural workers, Black folks who use our minds. We learned early that our devotion to learning, to a life of the mind, was a counter-hegemonic act, a fundamental way to resist every strategy of white racist colonization. Though they did not define or articulate these practices in theoretical terms, my teachers were enacting a revolutionary pedagogy of resistance that was profoundly anti-colonial. And you can really see that Bell Hooks gives credit to the teachers in her early education that shaped her and molded her into the person that she became. And that's the type of teacher I want to be. And that's the type of impact that I want to have on my students. Yes, seven generations from now, I hope that education is, I hope that Black, brown, indigenous, oppressed people have self-determination when it comes to education. I hope that they are not just subjects of education, but they have the power to control their own education and determine what, their destiny is.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so now I want to look at the Jamboard and see what folks are saying. If one or two people want to unmute and speak their imaginings into the room, I would love that. Into the Zoom room, I would love that. Is there anyone who would like to?
Yeah, I can share. I also just love what you just said about self-determination, and I was like, oh, I need to add that too. But 7 generations from now, education will be about community and will be community-led. Education will draw on the knowledge and ways of being the Black and Indigenous communities have long seen the purpose of education to be. Education will be a source of connection and understanding, a way to truly build solidarity amongst communities.
Thank you, Meg. And I love the will. Education will be these things. Would anyone else like to share? Okay, I can read a couple as well. 7 generations from now, I hope education looks like those Black, Brown, Indigenous, and oppressed who have previously been the subjects of the educational system are in control of their own educational reality with the ability to self-determine what education is for themselves. 7 generations from now, I hope every student looks forward to coming to school, that we as teachers and professionals continue to work to make our classrooms safe and welcoming with the intention to know our students and to see them. All students are presumed competent. All resources are shared equally. Barriers are acknowledged and dismantled collectively. All stories and voices are heard. All students can bring their full humility into the school community, and it will truly feel like a community. Students and families are driving how we teach, learn, and grow together. Thank you for everyone who participated in the Jamboard. We want to hear from you also, as we go throughout. So let us know if you have questions, and we'll make note of them when we get to our Q&A portion. But thank you for participating with us. And so these are the types of conversations that we have in Practices of Freedom. I'm going to zoom out a bit and just talk about the project itself, what we seek to do and how and why. But thank you, like I said, for participating. Thank you for listening, for holding space, for the futures that we're really striving for. And so the reason that we are engaging in this project is because we understand the excellence of Black educators and educators of color historically and today. Like I said, the main text that we read was Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. This was the quote that Jason talked about, so you've already heard it. If you'd like to read it again. I know that when I was in high school, I learned about Brown versus the Board of Education and the desegregation of schools in a really particular way, through a really through a white lens, to speak frankly. All Black schools were described only in terms of the resources that they lacked and discrimination that they faced. And my teachers didn't help me understand the rigor, the commitment with which Black teachers taught. I had a Black teacher in kindergarten, and I had Black college professors, and nobody in the interim. And so for me, it's actually been really emotionally meaningful and healing to be in community with Black educators like Jason, who are in this program, and Black future educators like Haley, like Amarachi, like Nekiya. It's been extremely soul affirming to be in community with them. And they're the reason that we do this. The importance of educators who look like you and diverse educators for all students can't be overstated. Teachers of color produce measurable positive outcomes for their students, whether those are students of color and white students as well. Diverse teachers are associated with increased learning and SEL outcomes. They have higher expectations for their students of color, are less likely to use discriminatory disciplinary practices that remove students of color from the classroom. Students of color are less likely to drop out, to be disproportionately referred to special education, are more likely to sign up for and enroll in gifted programs and aspire to college and AP courses. It's really important to have an educator who looks like you, who cares about you, who sees the best in you and expects the most from you. But unfortunately, like myself, a lot of students, Black and otherwise, don't have access to teachers of color consistently throughout their educational journeys. And so Nekiya was talking about these statistics in the beginning when she introduced herself. 4% of teachers in Pennsylvania are Black. 6% of teachers in Pennsylvania are teachers of color, which is low even for the United States, in which 18% of teachers nationally are teachers of color. Half of schools employ an all-white teaching force, which really sounds like it should be illegal. Half of schools have not a single teacher of color, and 37% of school districts are the same, without a single teacher of color. And so that is part of why we're engaging in this project. We want to find and support and bring together Black educators and pre-service educators like Nekiya, like Jason, like Haley, like Amarachi. Nekiya, do you want to take over this slide and share more about this and why we do this?
So yes, I would love to. I thought this honestly was pretty interesting because I feel like I could have talked about a lot of different things. But for me, in my personal experience, I'll start with understanding this idea of like teacher prep programs and like how practice of freedom kind of helped my thought process with how they should look and what I'm getting. So starting off with the teacher prep program I'm in particular, I would not say that it is as insufficient as other programs that I've heard about. I feel as though we do touch on different topics that other schools may not. But what I will say is that there's a lot of growth and a lot of improvement that needs to be done for these programs, because sometimes I still feel as though like, I don't know what what's going to happen when I'm in a classroom, like fully, or like what's going to happen next. And I think that kind of all steers from just like, there just not being those conversations, or professors or teachers may be airy to want to bring up certain conversations, but like where we're at in the position that we're in, these conversations need to be brought up if we want to see any change. And it sucks that us as the students that we have to push it so hard, but at the same token, it's one of those things that's like, okay, well, if we want change, we do have to make that happen. And another point that I would like to bring up is that in a lot of these teacher prep programs, like Rachel just spoke about, just even the teacher population and how many of people of color are in the pipeline is very little, but it's just as in the prep programs, like it's very little. But I think that comes from a lot of different things and stems from a lot of different things. We want diversity, or the schools, not even that, well, we want diversity, but that the school system want diversity, that's a question that, we're still trying to like dig deeper into. But I would definitely say that there are a lot of things that stem from why there isn't a lot of diversity inside these teacher prep programs. And I would definitely say, starting off with like student teaching. Student teaching is a job, even down from just being inside the classroom. Some programs, I know mine is 20 hours a week, but not even just that, but also the preparation of being that student teacher. And when you aren't getting compensation for that, it's really hard for you to want to go into a major that will take away those opportunities of you being able to fund yourself, because you are in these programs to where you're student teaching with no funding. So it's like, we want diversity, but if you look at, historically, like as people of color, like school's already expensive for us. We already don't have the funds for school. So now we're going into a position where we're not going to, be able to work while doing so because we're in these programs. But then we're not getting compensation for that. And then that all ties into just like, like paying, like the financial support, just like they're really not being that on top of just, that conversation of like teachers not getting paid enough. Now, now going back into like practice of freedom, I feel like we had a lot of these conversations, and it definitely helps support like, okay, as a Black teacher, what do I want and what do I need when I go inside these classrooms to best support my students? And we had a lot of those different conversations. And then also like pre-service teachers, like how can we bring those teachers in to help us become our best selves, as well as how can they help us like define what kind of teacher we want to be inside the classroom? And then even going to like community educators, like how can we bring these community educators inside our classrooms to help benefit our students as well? Because as we know, if we can bring the community inside the classroom, it'll just benefit everyone as a whole, which will, then, want the youth to want to be educated and want to know different things and et cetera. So I think overall, Practice of Freedom definitely helped out with, just helping myself form what I want to see inside the classroom. And I think what I'm trying to say overall, it just helped me form what I want to see inside the classroom and what type of teacher I want to be. And it really I guess those spaces of what I wasn't getting inside my program, Practice of Freedom filled it.
Thank you, Nekiya. Your ideas, your observations, your goals, desires, and commitments really do serve as the foundation for why this project was created. And so with the folks who participate, there are scholarships and stipends for college students, especially for pre-service educators, as they do face engaging in student teaching without compensation. And we know that financial barriers to teaching are a portion of what stops Black people from becoming educators, in addition to other systemic factors, including racism. She also touched on the intergenerational mentorship and support that folks in the program experience. So as you might have noticed, all of our panelists come from different spaces in their lives, in their educations, in their careers. So in the project, we bring together micro collectives, small groups of 4, where there's one high school student, one college student, one teacher, practicing K-12 teacher, and one community educator. Community educator is a very broad term that might be a homeschooling caregiver, a pastor, a coach, an equity advocate at PPS, working for the district. Retired Black teachers also are a really core piece of the community education. And so to support pre-service educators in building connections and being mentored and being in classroom spaces with experienced Black educators is really, really important, for also emotionally and also to prepare for the work that is before them. And as Nekiya said, bringing the community inside the classroom is also really enriching for the students themselves. And seeing what it has been like for us to engage together, a lot of the teachers are also interested in us being inside of their classrooms in a somewhat consistent basis, engaging with, knowing, and supporting their students, building connections with their staff, especially the pre-service educators. Another key goal for the program is criticality. Like Nekiya mentioned, it's important to have diversity, to have Black educators, but we also want socially conscious, critically conscious Black educators and co-conspirators. We want folks who are able to name and disrupt the injustices that they see, in addition to their identity and their ability to be a caring role model for their students who looks like their students. And so one piece of our program were the Freedom Seminars, 1-credit courses at the University of Pittsburgh, taught by various professors on a wide range of freedom topics. These classes, we have some of the photos posted this fall. Dr. Watufani Poe is teaching for an Afro-Latin American feminism. And it was really special to bring youth, community educators, teachers to learn with Pitt students and for Pitt students to learn from. And so Jason's going to speak more about what that really played out as and the impact of it.
Yes, I would say that the Freedom Seminars were just energizing as an educator. In all of that, and Nekiya just kind of spoke to the process of education of, getting certified to be a teacher is not always really affirming. Being in these PWIs, predominantly white institutions, as a student of color, you kind of look up some days and just wonder, what am I doing here? And, education is something that I felt like at times it's just something that I need to get through so that I can get this paper. I'm sure some of y'all have heard that at some point. And so, you know, as a teacher, you know, they talk about how continuing education is important, but you just don't, you want to be able to do it on your own terms. And with CUE and with the Freedom Seminars, that is what we were able to do. And when I got in these classrooms, it was refreshing to be back into like a college environment, and just the thinking and the learning, but from a revolutionary mindset, a liberatory mindset. The one that I participated in was political education and freedom struggles. That was a powerful course. Shout out to Dr. Patel. And then another powerful one was the prison, schools, and abolition. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And just, they had real people in there just talking about real issues. And, you know, it really gave me another perspective on, you know, going back to school and continuing education. And, you know, something that I would, if I could do it like this, then something that I would really want to tap into and look into further. You know, as a teacher, and I'll wrap up, but as a teacher, sometimes, you know, once you stand in front of those students, a large portion of what you learn in that college classroom goes out the window, you know? And so when you know, that kind of makes you hesitant to spend money and time and energy, you know, when you're already working and going back to school. And, you know, these freedom seminars didn't feel like that.
Thank you. I'm glad that they were grounded, that they were applicable, that they were adaptive to your needs, your situation, your goals, your intellectual curiosities. Thank you for speaking on that. Another piece of the study that was engaged in was attending events. So there were readings, there were independent reflections, writing exercises, discussions, of course, and there are also events hosted by various organizations within the University of Pittsburgh and broadly. So obviously CUE, the Center for Urban Education, with the book studies and panel discussions, sessions like this at CUESEF, Kinloch Commons for Critical Pedagogy and Leadership, Pride at Pitt, the Center on Race and Social Problems, the Center for African Studies, the Abolitionist Teaching Network, and Education for Liberation were all some of the most impactful organizations that we learned with and from during the course of the year. Something we're excited to do in the future is having an email list so that folks who are not in the program still get exposed to these organizations doing really important work and have the ability to be in events, in public facing events with us and talk together. And then of course, relationality. So you can't really engage in a program like this and not begin to care for and care about the people that are around you. And that was really central. Our goal was to have safe spaces where we are learning, we are studying, we are naming and resisting oppression, but we're also getting to know each other and caring about each other, asking about one another. We want for folks to have a strong sense of belonging, of agency, of I don't want to say resilience, but of understanding exactly what they're up against. A space where we are not lying, we're not gaslighting, we're speaking frankly about what it is that is in front of us, that we are taking apart piece by piece. And so it has been really, really special to get to know these folks. Shout out to Sueña, who took these really, really beautiful images as we spent time together. And thank you again to the audience for being with us and sharing this time with us. These are some goals that we have tied to some values that drive us. So one, we understand that the work is collective. So right now we are engaging in interviews and accepting application for the next cohort of folks who will participate in this experience. Again, high school students, college students, pre-service teachers, practicing teachers, and community educators are invited to apply. We are deepening our engagement with this current cohort that you see before you today. How do we continue our relationships? How do we continue learning together? How do we support their resistance? And also supporting local Black student unions arose as extremely important. So there are 8 spots for each generation or each educational positionality, but we want our engagement to be larger than that through class visits, through engagement with the Black student unions at Woodland Hills, SciTech, Propel charter at the schools where our teachers come from. We also understand that the members of the collectives are active and empowered already at the time that they join us. And so making sure that our reflections bring out the things that they're noticing and that they're working on, and that we support those so that they can let us know, I am a retired Black teacher, I want to mentor Black teachers who are coming in, Black pre-service teachers. Or I am an English teacher and I want folks in my class. I need Black educators in my class, intergenerationally engaging with my kids. So having space for people to tell us what they need and for us to pool our resources and our time and our attention to meeting those and speaking to those and growing them over time, incorporating them into the infrastructure of the program has been really, really important. And then lastly, that we're standing on strong shoulders. Like we said, there is a rich legacy of Black educational excellence that we are looking at, holding on to, standing on as we move forward. We're not doing this for the first time. We're not creating something that is completely new. We have rich histories and texts to read and to understand that this has been the way that we've approached education historically, as a way for freedom and for empowerment, and never losing sight of that. So now we are going to have a Q&A with the folks in the program. I'll serve as moderator. We would love to hear your questions, your comments, your reflections with them. So I do have questions, we have questions lined up, but please raise your hand or send a chat. We'll monitor the chat. Christy has also volunteered to support us in monitoring the chat, and we really want to hear from you all too, okay? Our first question, how do you practice freedom in your daily life? And how did participating in the program support you in that? And I would love to start with Sister IAsia, if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. So a couple of ways that I practice freedom in my daily life. First, in mothering 4 daughters. It really starts there. Having daughters is a profound ministry. It is deep. I have my youngest is 6 and my oldest is 24. And so the program supported me, first of all, by acknowledging that if my babies can't come to some things, then I can't come. I prefer to, freedom is safety in that regard. I prefer to keep my babies close to me because I just feel better when they're near me, particularly the youngest one. And what a joy it is, to raise daughters is beautiful. The second way that I practice freedom is through activism, which is the source of resistance for me. And in activism, really, the way that I define it and hold it is the deliberate, intentional participation in communities or in the privacy of my own mind and spirit, where I'm continually resisting oppression in my own life. And the program supported that because there were so many different scholarly perspectives to guide and to ground that and to build inquiry around that so that I can continue to improve. I also practice freedom by acknowledging my full identity and reclamation of identifying as a cultural being in the world. I am a cultural being in the world, and that is liberating in and of itself. To be proud and to be one and to be centered in who I am culturally is liberation. And in the micro group that I was a part of, I didn't have to ask permissions to say, okay, y'all, I'm gonna differentiate the difference between making a statement that's in a racial context as opposed to a cultural context. I simply expressed how I needed to, said what I needed to say, and that's exactly how I was able to be supported in that way. A part of my story with practices of freedom, yeah, there were some tears. I cried a couple times in my micro group because working in urban education is difficult, and it's difficult because it's not you have to pick and choose how your activism is able to illuminate in institutions. And you have to be 100% sure when you're taking risks or taking chances on certain things that involve you being brave. I'm not sure why that's echoing, but I also wanted to say that I practice veneration by lifting up those that came before me, the living and those that are in the ancestral inner planes. I'm not too busy for that. I'm not too busy to ground my liberation in the firm reality and understanding that I have that because of those that didn't have that. And that's permanent. That's going to be going on until I take my last breath on earth. And the program supported that because it was a very open, fluid environment that while it was grounded in scholarship and literature, that how we are and who we are as individuals was the most important thing, and provided that we respected one another, held one another, and supported one another. That was a high standard that we had. And then lastly, I practice freedom, particularly as an educator, by naming and claiming my identity as a South African Khoikhoi identifying person in the world that happens to be an immigrant. A lot of what I carry comes from what I need to resolve with my immigrant identity, being a continental African that's immersed fully and completely in a struggle that calls on nothing short of solidarity within four brothers and sisters. So the program supported me in that because I was able to express that. I was able to prioritize that, and brothers and sisters in the collective were able to hear that, provide feedback, and nurture however they were able to. So that is how I would answer that question as I pass it back to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Sister I. I'm really appreciative of your vulnerability across the entire year, asking for what you need, naming what you're up against. I heard a lot as you were talking, and I really appreciated that word standard that you use, a standard or expectation of love, of care, of authenticity, of identity and affiliation, of building, of holding one another, of making space for one another. So thank you very much. Felicity, how do you practice freedom? And how did participating in the program support you?
Hello. Okay, thank you. For me, the program has, well, as a high school student, I'm still sort of figuring things out in the world. And the program has sort of helped me find my own voice, speaking up when I notice things that are wrong, helping me notice different problems in the world. So I practice freedom in my daily life just by speaking out whenever I see something wrong. And the program has helped me counter my own racial biases that I didn't even know about, and many other things. I've learned a lot about different topics, and it's changed my perspective in the world. And it helped me realize that there's a lot I can do, even as just a high school student, and when I'm older as well. So that's mostly what I've taken away from the program and how I practice freedom in my daily life. Thank you.
I'm really glad that it was supportive to you in that way. I think about how when I was in high school, I was able to have conversations like these with my parents, but not with teachers. And I think it would have been really powerful to have these conversations with teachers and teachers who look like me.
Yeah, that's what the program is definitely helpful for that. Seeing teachers who look like me. Thank you.
And I know that looking at inequity, especially in places that you haven't noticed it before, can be heavy. It can be painful. And so that's also why I'm glad, one, that it was supportive for you and affirming for you, and that it was a caring environment, not just, here, look at all these horrible things now. Good luck, but that we notice these things together and that we talk them through and process them together. Amarachi, how do you practice freedom?
I practice freedom in my daily life by using my full name. I think that's one of the big main ways I practice freedom in my daily life. And to even take it a step further, I would even say correcting people. I guess, like, how do you think of correction and freedom? Like, it's kind of like unparalleled, but I'm giving myself the freedom to not let people not misaddress me. I don't know if that's a word, but not let people kind of dance around my name and just pretend that they know how to say it, and just instead of just asking how to say it, I would prefer that rather than like calling me a name that I wouldn't prefer to be called by, or anything like that. So that's one of the biggest way I practice freedom in my daily life, especially since from grades kindergarten to high school, I did not go by my full name. I went by like a childhood nickname, but on my parents, like for my parents, when they register me for school, they put the name you see on the Zoom, and it would be in the yearbooks, and I would hate it so much. Like, I would try to, when for the form, with the ordering forms, I would try to fill it out before my dad could fill it out, because I knew he was going to put my full name on it. But of course, that didn't always work. So I think the biggest inspiration that really gave me the push to practice freedom this way was Dean Kinlock, actually, in the School of Education, because I told her my name is Amara. Like, I went by that before I went by my full name. And she was like, "Oh, that's pretty." And then I told her my full name, and then she like had this reaction that I've never seen anyone have that reaction towards my name. I was like, maybe it is nice. Maybe it just might be nice. But I sent her an email following up, recapping the event, because we did talk after, we were talking. And then I told her, I was like, now I know what people mean when they say representation matters. Because, I've heard that, like, oh, representation matters. We need representation in the media and in the movies. And not saying that we don't, but I never really had my own personal experience with it. And this literally just happened in April. I think that the closing ceremony. Okay.
Yeah.
April. So that was like, I'm 20. So this is getting at 20 years worth of healing. So it was really nice. It was really nice. And I'm glad I'm able to give myself the allowance to not be so scared to practice freedom in any way I want to, really.
That is a beautiful takeaway. Thank you for sharing. That made me emotional towards the middle. That you almost made me cry. And I pulled from that, I pulled a lot from that. But one thing that I pulled from that is that boundaries are love, that boundaries are caring, that correction is love, and correction is caring. So thank you for that wisdom that you earned in your 20 years. I want to pause and want to say thank you for all the love in the chat that you all are sending. And I also want to read out a comment from someone, from Leah McCord, who said that they went to Pitt, saw seeing no teachers of color during pre-service and student teaching, one professor of color during their collegiate time, knowing that they wanted to teach in an urban environment, that it was lonely and it was difficult, and that they worked hard to arrive at their own understanding of race and culturally relevant teaching. That it took a long time, and they're still learning and growing, as we all are. I have another question lined up, but want to pause. Does anyone in the audience want to ask a question of our participants? All right, if it's He said, yes, I do a lesson with teachers about names and how children want to be addressed. Names have significance and importance. That's a wonderful gift you've been given with a beautiful name. If you do have a question in mind and maybe you need extra think time, that's kind of how I operate. Know that I'll be coming back and I'll be reaching out for you. So please do what you need to feel comfortable. How does your educational experience as a child inform the educator that you are or that you aspire to be? With the theme of this conference being memories, there's also a theme within our program of memories and of understanding the kids that we were, the classrooms that we were in, and how we bring those with us. Like most of, if not 100% of the time, those stories, those engagements that we have with our teacher come with us as we operate in the classroom, even as an adult in the future. And so I think we're going to hear from Nekiya first. How does your educational experience as a kid inform the educator that you are and that you're going to be?
Okay, so for myself, I went to a lot of different elementary schools. I went to schools in Virginia as well as in Pittsburgh, but like all of them were different. I've been to predominantly white schools, predominantly Black schools. I've been to public, I've been to private, I've been to charters. So I feel like my experience is extremely like interesting. And I say that because I felt like I took a little bit from each and kind of figured out what I did and did not like with all of them. And it kind of like forms my like identity of what I want to be inside my classroom. But I think the number one thing that I've learned that I would love to like just bring into my classroom, especially because of the environment I want to teach and the students that I would, I feel that I'll be not even most engaging with, but most impactful with, is teaching the truth and not sugarcoating. I think that the education system is forced to do that. And inside my classroom, I refuse. I think if a question is being asked, it should be answered. I feel as though that inside my classrooms, I want students to be able to think for themselves and advocate for themselves. And I will be bringing that up heavily inside my classrooms because as students or as the system is, it wants to think for you and not allow you to think for yourself. And I think that students should be able to sit back and critically think about topics that we're discussing or talking about. Especially because I want to be like English history kind of teacher. And I think that is like also just like interesting because even in Dr. Orr's class, like watching him, like he seems to be very big on just allowing his students to think for themselves and just being themselves inside the classroom. And I think from just my experiences and just dealing with just different things, I think I would definitely just want my students to just advocate and think for themselves. And I will, I guess advocate for that, for them to advocate for themselves. I'm trying to think of anything else that I would really want to like, that I would want to be inside my classrooms as an educator. But I think as of now, that's all I have. But if I do think of anything else, I'll definitely bring that up.
Thank you. I was about to say, this isn't a buzzer beater. We're having a discussion. No one is rushed. No one's being put on the spot. So let us know when you feel like you have it for us. And also, I think, did you call Jason Dr. Orr? That seems, what is that? I don't know what
I do, and it's so by habit.
Claim
I don't know why I keep doing that.
And so now we'll hear from Dr. Orr. How did your experience as a kid inform the education that you're going to be? There you are. Excuse me. There you are.
Nekiya just gave me an honorary PhD. I'm owning that, man. Let's go. So my education experience as a child, I was always that student growing up that was always like bright, always, doing well on the test, standardized tests, but I never really saw school as a relevant experience to me. And my parents actually used to worry about me, my dad and because they were corporate and they had high expectations for me, but I just wasn't really living up to that. I remember them sending me to a psychologist trying trying to figure out what's going on with me. And it wasn't until but I love reading, you know, and I did a lot of reading on my own. And it wasn't until they saw my test scores in my junior year of high school, and they put me in AP English. And it was at that time where I just really began to like see that like this, just how interesting learning could be if you see it properly. And I feel like that was like a pivotal point, like a paradigm shift for me. And I think I had like a 1.7 grade point average, and that semester I got like a 3.8, and my dad was like wondering what was going on. But I say that to say I want to be that teacher that affirms that student that's bright but doesn't really see the brightness in themselves. And so that's how, you know, my experience educationally informs the educator that I am. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. Tricia, do you want to talk about this one? How did the child that you were, the student that you were, impact the educator that you are now?
Well, it's always super quick because I'm like, oh, I know you said it's not a buzzer beater, but you have so many good questions and there's so many more beautiful things to be said. But with this one, I have to say that I did not experience like any harm or marginalization in school. As a white girl, I was like fine in school. And I also did not like school. I did not enjoy, I like the little comment, I shouldn't say little, the comment on the Jamboard about enjoying school. I did not enjoy school. By the time I was in 12th grade, I could probably say I hated school. And I remember like the strongest feeling, like a feeling of confinement, like in a literal building, like a feeling of confinement in thinking even. And so I didn't decide to become a teacher until my junior year at Pitt undergrad. But I think that like that word and that feeling of confinement is the one thing that I've consistently made sure that I'm working towards and understanding and learning and unlearning. You know, and my classroom right now still has 4 walls, but like you were talking about, Rachel, before, about how can it be less confining for young people is the question I'm thinking about. You know, the walls are literally there at this moment in time. As so many of you were speaking about, bringing others in the classroom who need to be there for the Black students and all the students in my room. So that's the one word that I kind of go back to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I like that nod. You said at this moment in time, understanding that so much change will be happening, that things will hopefully one day be completely unrecognizable to what they are now. And so I liked that a lot. I resonated with that really deeply. Our next question: how do experiences beyond traditional education settings bring balance, racial uplift, and resolve to what is experienced by Black children in schools today? We'll start with Sister I.
So for this particular question, the traditional educational setting we know is based on a scripted curriculum, unless the teacher is feeling empowered enough to use auxiliary materials to extend the learning beyond what's there. And we know that with high stakes testing and the hyper focus on quantitative data, that there's a specific way that the state and the city has to maintain a narrative and a story about how students are performing and how they're faring in educational. But those traditional educational experiences and protocols that are in place, I ask myself, do they bring balance, racial uplift, and resolve to what is experienced by Black children? And not oftentimes, depending on what the caregiver or the parent understands about those high stakes situations, Probably not. Possibly, but probably not. So what I offer is that there are multiple educations that have to occur. Three primary ones. The first one that occurs in the family, the second one that occurs in the family community, the third one that occurs in the actual brick and mortar space. And it's up to, to you. I invite you to determine what the priority is there. We know that unless you're a homeschooling caregiver or parent, that you're going to send your child to school. So multiple educations are happening all the time. And when there's balance, the scales are even. They're not tipped. Or if we use the visual image of that comes from out of ancient Kemet, the wise bird who's called Tahuti, and Tahuti stands on one leg. It's a bird that can stand on one leg and never fall, no matter what happens. The balance is there. So through multiple educations occurring, whatever's uncensored, whatever's not prohibited, whatever's forgotten, or whatever's omitted is addressed in those auxiliary enrichment spaces that allow for children's nascent needs to be addressed. And so when racial uplift is involved, it begins to serve as a foundation for other types of uplift, whether it's cultural uplift, to our sister's point, ethnic uplift, immigration narratives, whatever the story or situation may be. The resolve is accomplished by what I had mentioned earlier, by attending to the inclusion, the accessibility, and the victory that's accomplished when a student or a child feels that they belong. But if those things can occur steadily multiple times out of the day, it calls for additional educations to occur. Sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5, and adults mirror that, particularly adults that pursue multiple degrees. It holds a mirror to that. It's an analogy for that. But for children, particularly a Black or brown-skinned child, regardless to what part of the global diaspora they come from, traditional education requires there to be multiple educations that occur. To borrow from the Latin term educare, to pull out, to extract, and then to illuminate, so that there's a sense and a semblance of wellness. So that's how I would resolve that question. And back to you again.
Thank you. I like how you pulled on that terminology of it's extracting, because there are some people where it's a deposit. And I think a lot of folks are familiar with like the banking system or the banking method of educating, understanding that everything is already inside of them to be cultivated, to be nurtured, to be spotlit and pulled out. And also the multiple educations being necessary. That makes me think about community educators like yourself and what you represent within the program, the questions that we are asking and interrogating of ourselves, of who is considered an educator, of who has something to teach teachers. And that's why it's really important for us, for youth to be in the space and for community educators to be in the space, so that it's not so siloed and isolated that it's just teachers and pre-service teachers. Like, this is a full, well-rounded community of caregivers, of community workers, of educators. And thank you again. I can't thank you all enough for just being a part of it. Jason, how about you go ahead and answer this question? I'm going to put a note in the chat, just letting you all know we're going to be calling for questions from you again and reading from the chat after this question. So if you need that preparation, I just want you all to feel comfortable.
So I just wanted to, this question brings to my mind that, the day of sending your child to school and expecting the school system to educate your child fully it may have never existed, but if it ever did, then that day is long gone. And so the importance of tapping into community resources, to name a few that really were impactful in helping me get my daughter through the educational system. Shout out to her. She just now graduated from Slippery Rock. But I want to shout out 100 Black Men of Greater Pittsburgh, a powerful, powerful mentor program. The Carter G. Woodson Academy, sponsored by Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Powerful, powerful, impactful program. The Black Male and Black Female Leadership Development Institute. Since she's on here, I never was a participant, but I know people that were impacted by the Freedom School sponsored by Dr. House. Super, super important and just impactful to their lives. And so I wanted to shout her out. And then I would also just never underestimate the power of being a mentor. 2 books that changed my life were given to me when I was, I believe, about 12 years old, and they were given to me by a friend of my mother's. And they were the autobiography of Assata Shakur and The Spook Who Sat by the Door. And I could just remember, I loved reading. I was reading books like Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary, but at that point, it took a revolutionary turn because as a 11 or 12-year-old, I was reading revolutionary books. And so just never underestimate the power that somebody has as that you can have on a young person as a mentor individually. So that's what I would say.
10, 11, 12.
Thank you. Are you all able to see my screen still, or has that stopped?
Sorry, I was trying to make Christy co-host and I messed it up.
Made her host.
Yeah.
It happens. No, that happens. No worries.
Let me just go back to this.
Hey, Spencer, do you mind muting yourself?
Apologies.
No worries. I'm glad that you're here.
I don't know what is going on right now. I'm having some technical difficulties, y'all. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Fantasy. Oh, I did promise we were going to pause and hear from anyone in the audience. Does anyone want to share a question to some folks on the panel, even a reflection, something that you're thinking about, a way this is making you feel? I want to make sure that you all feel welcomed to bring your voices into the space. And thanks for how active you've been in the chat. I appreciate it. Carrie or Kari, let us know how to pronounce your name, and then feel free to take it away.
Hi, thank you. It's Carrie. So
Carrie.
You got it right the first time. I'm a special ed teacher, and I know I'm finding more and more that this is even more of an imbalance of equity and freedom and, the trap. And I'm just wondering, are you guys looking in that direction at all? Or if anyone has any comments on maybe how what they do in that space.
Can you say a little bit more about that? You talked about equity and freedom.
Yeah, I'm recently, I just got my ED from Pitt, and I focused on parent empowerment through a Center for Independent Living. I stepped out of the school system to kind of work to build stronger transition skills for parents. And the barriers were profound. I couldn't even get into school systems that had more need. My focus now is to kind of put my boots on the ground and talk with community organizations and see if there's any way that they could. I know that there's a need to share the resources, but I can't even get to talk to anyone about, pathways. So it really just, it was very eye-opening. I knew it was bad. I didn't realize it was so horrible. I looked at, there's a client assistance program, and just the wording on their website would make it impossible for someone that might not even have a strong high school education to understand what their services were. So, I imagine that's that it's not just in my area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for your question. I see Amarachi has her hand raised, so she can start us off. And any other panelists, please feel free to engage.
I don't think I quite understood the question in its entirety, because I heard something from Carrie when, wait, sorry, the screen disappeared, so I thought I got kicked out. But I think I heard something from Carrie when she said something about being in special ed and what it's like to be in this program from that perspective. Was that like the first part?
When I hear everyone talking about the freedom and being seen, I feel like many special ed students are even further down on that ability to have that freedom. And I'm just wondering, and I do believe that if the school system has a very well-functioning special ed program, they most likely have a very strong educational system. So I'm just wondering if you guys are looking at all at the special ed programs that you're working in. That's a little bit more clear.
Okay, I understand now.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, I actually have my own personal experience. I came from a predominantly white school district, and the education system was pretty revered. It was really good in almost name any category, but the special education system, it was hard, but I didn't learn, like, part of the reason why, like, I am responding to your question is because if I were to work in a school as a speech therapist, I would be classified as a special ed teacher as well. And what I kind of learned about and through my time at Pitt so far is the amount of Black and Brown children that get recommended to go to special ed because of them speaking AAVE or any other Black language. So yeah, I don't know if that like inspires something, but
I think I can kind of go next with like trying to answer this question a little bit. So I mean, I said it previously before, but like with my program that I'm in, I'll be getting my master's in special education K through 12. And I think that you asked the question of, do we focus on special education, and while doing so, special education, if we have a great special education program, then you're saying that the district or school or whomever directly would be a good well, would that be like a good like school or whatever? And I think to answer that question a little bit, I think it's like a pipeline. So like it all kind of like stems down to like trying to just figure out what's good for the greater good. I think I feel like it's a pipeline that breaks down into so many different like structures. So like we need a good special education program, but we also need to figure out exactly who we're serving in that special education program. And I think that when we figure that out, because I feel like these are all different diameters and like they all connect into one, but I feel like there's so many pieces that like we can have a great special education program, but that doesn't mean that it's serving for all, or who is it directly serving for. I think that they all just come in different diameters because again, like you said, special education also just like forms so many different things from like IEPs with just reading or a student having autism, you know what I mean? So like I feel like that's such a huge spectrum. But I get where you're coming from with like, you feel as though those students may have like the hardest struggle. And if we were to get that hardest struggle down pat, how would the rest of the system be? And I think that's honestly an interesting question. Because it's like, even though we're talking about special ed, there are so many inequalities within that as well. I think because you could talk about special ed and it's serving the predominantly white race, and then also it's serving minorities, and how like minorities are overly represented in special education, and they don't even need to be put in that position. So I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know if that answered your questions. I feel like I just went all over the place with that. But like, I feel like that question is just so broad and it's hard to like narrow it down to if we were to fix, would the rest of the system fix as well? Because in my own like idea when it comes to this education is that we and I think I felt like I said this to you before, Rachel, that when trying to think about the education system and trying to like fix it in quotes, that's like throwing a piece of grass, throwing a piece of glass on the ground and trying to put it back together. Like that's just not how the education system works. We cannot fix something that's already been broken.
And even deeper, we can't fix something that was designed for our oppression, our downfall, our categorization, and placement at the bottom of hierarchies. It is 11:29, so I'm very, very sorry to cut you off. We lost some time due to the technical issues we were having, but I just want to thank you all again for being here. If you want to continue engaging with us, learning about the program, engaging in conversation with the folks who are here before you today, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect you. If you look on the second page of the Jamboard, we have a link, and I can actually put in the chat, a link to our website, which has our application for the upcoming year. As I said, we are engaging in interviews currently to welcome our next cohort of 32 individuals who are dedicated and committed to educational equity and justice and freedom. And so thanks for your time. Thanks for your adaptability and your flexibility as we're navigating this space. It has been really beautiful to be in dialogue with you, and I hope to hear from you to continue the conversation.